good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carol, here from Sunset Learning Institute from Marketing Department. Thank you all for joining us today for this special Tech Talk. I'm here with our specialist, Russell. Russell, thank you so much for joining us and teaching and sharing your knowledge about the CCNP test.
All right, excellent. So first off, just want to say welcome to everybody who's here. I see someone going through and mentioning Gustavo. Nice. Hello. Nice to meet you. Okay, so we are going to go through and talk about a few different things, right, about the CCNP. Okay, so I want to kind of make sure everyone is aware of the fact that there are multiple classes that can potentially be taken care of. So we'll discuss the idea of recertification. What's it mean? Okay, being able to use things like continuing education credits to be able to recertify. And then we'll go through and talk about our CCNP options. Okay, as I show, it is a respective network certification for more than 30 years. We've been, if you're CCNP certified, you'll need to pass the ENCOR exam and at least one elective exam. They like to call them correspondence, if you will, or places for us to go through and be able to make specializations, excuse me. Okay. So they show, as far as recertification, we get continued education anytime you go through and take another class from Cisco. And we'll discuss not only the idea of being able to take these and get your continuing education, but how many points or credits each one of the classes is for us. As they show, you need up to 80 credits to recertify for your CCNP, or 40 credits, and you can pass one concentration exam. Okay, so we can go through and do it either way. So essentially, think of it as the 40 credits to be able to recertify for your ENCOR, and then another concentration exam to essentially recertify you for the CCNP. Okay, or like we mentioned, we can use 80 credits. We're going to go through all the different valid courses and show you what they cover. We'll show you which each one's worth. And you're going to see some of these concentration exams have a test that you can test into. And some of them are really meant for other tests, right? Really to kind of get you certified and up to speed with all the different tests that they have available for us. So here are all the concentration exams. So obviously everyone has to pass the ENCOR exam, which we'll talk about. I see quite a few people just based off of that poll, the polling information within there, that you guys had some questions about the ENCOR, and I'd love to open them up for those as well. But I kind of want to go through each one of them as far as these concentration information is all included. And they show the first one, the ENSDWI, is implementing the SD-WAN solutions. This could be a 5-day course that goes through and obviously talks about the software-defined WAN. Okay, so we'll go through and discuss the idea of vBond and vManage and the vSmart controllers, and they go through and configure information with. You're going to see a few different things that you have to go through and configure. We have feature templates. From those feature templates, we then configure device templates. Those device templates then get deployed to configuration groups. Okay, and we're going to show. They go through and talk about a lot of different things within the SD-WAN environment. Essentially, I see a lot of people going through in SD-WAN, upgrading from a DMVPN type of environment. So dynamic multi-point VPN was a way of being able to get site-to-site tunnels without having to configure every single one of those tunnels. And we see the exact same thing in an SD-WAN solution. The big difference is it's not just going to be for things like IPsec tunnels over an internet connection. Now we have the availability to do that across an MPLS core by utilizing a Metro Ethernet connections that we have. Any kind of transport network that we can communicate from site to site, we will automatically create an IPsec tunnel for it. You'll see one of the classes they have, the CCFND, the Cisco Catalyst Center Fundamentals that they have, or Foundations courses. And obviously this goes through the new rebranded Cisco DNA Center is now called Catalyst Center. And so we discuss the idea of how we set up and going through and doing that Catalyst Center. How does it work? How do we make changes to our network device that we have available for us? And how do we do monitoring of that network as well? It allows us to be able to set up a true SD access environment. Okay. We'll see this ENCC is the designing and implementing cloud connectivity. This is really focusing on the idea of an SD-WAN and using cloud on-ramp to be able to communicate from any site directly to our local clouds that we have. Okay. Now, these could be private clouds. They could be a public cloud as well, via AWS or Amazon Azure, or excuse me, Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud Services. They have the EENA, designing and implementing enterprise network assurance, okay, to validate that the different devices are there. We have the ENSLD cost, the designing Cisco enterprise networks, right? Used to be a part of the CCDP, if you will, the design professional, but now considered one of those concentration courses that we have available for the CCNP. They have the ENWLSD courses, designing Cisco enterprise wireless networks. We have the ENAUI, implementing automation for Cisco enterprise solutions. We have one of the courses that I see a lot of people end up taking right after the ENCOR class to try and get their routing and switching enterprise CCNP, the implementing Cisco enterprise advanced routing and services. We have the ENWLSI, the implementing Cisco enterprise wireless networks. The CSAU is the introduction of automation for Cisco solutions. The SDA fundamentals, it's understanding Cisco software-defined access fundamentals using Catalyst Center. And then you have the wireless fundamentals class as well, or foundations class that they have available for us. So we're going to kind of see each one at a time, what they cover. If they have a test, what's the test? We'll also see what we have as far as availability for different continuing education points for them. Okay, kind of going through them one at a time, starting off with the SD-WAN solutions. Said it helps you design, deploy, and configure, manage the Cisco software-defined wide area network. Okay. Like I said, we're going to see a lot of different things. One of the big things that a lot of people like about this course is the fact that we go through not only the idea of quality of service and quality of experience in this particular environment, but one of the big things is you're going to see that they go through and talk about what we call application-aware routing. So we're matching certain applications and utilizing the quality of our tunnel information, because we've got a bunch of IPsec tunnels from site to site, to determine which is the best tunnel to send our individual data. Now, that data may be specific applications or groups of applications that we're utilizing. And what we do within this application-aware routing is essentially to go through and give an application a service level agreement. What do we need from our IPsec tunnel? Packet loss, jitter statistics, average delay, round trip time, quality of experience score, to be able to make sure that this application will work correctly on that network. Okay. And if then, and only then, if we reach that service level agreement through one of our tunnels, will it be considered our best tunnel for this particular application? Okay. As you'll see within the NSDWI course, there is a test for it. It's the 300-415 exam that we have available for us. And this course itself is worth up to 32 continuing education points. Okay. We have the Catalyst Center Foundations course. Again, going through and training designed to expand our knowledge of the Catalyst Center, basics, deployment, scalability options that we have. Its introduction and integration with the identity services engine, which is a huge piece to it to be able to support the idea of Cisco TrustSec from end to end in our network. Right? You see it supports the idea of not only network automation, right? So being able to do things like REST and net config access to the Catalyst Center itself, so we can do things like Python scripting. It allows us to be able to make sure that our devices are still available, give us information about network security, and allows us to be able to reference the rest of the network. So it's that one pane, a single pane of glass for us to use to be able to configure essentially all devices, our routers, our switches, our firewalls, our wireless LAN controllers and access points are all configured from within Catalyst Center. Now, as you show in this case right here, it's not related to any specific exam, okay? However, highly encouraged to take this training as an introduction to some of the topics that they have in the ENCOR class. From what I've seen out of the ENCOR, a lot of times there's so much information within inside the ENCOR class that some of the automation sections that we have kind of end up getting pushed to the very end. So they're kind of a little bit rushed, if you will, in the ENCOR. This goes through more detail about those and gives you information about what's going on within those automated aspects of the networking itself. And as they show again, 44 continuing education credits for the CCFND. We have the ENCC, which is designing and implementing cloud connectivity. They helps you develop the skills required to design and implement the cloud connectivity solutions. The idea of being able to leverage both private and public-based cloud information with connectivity into Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. And so you're going to see a lot of very similar in the way that we need to interact with these public cloud systems that we have available for us. But each one is done kind of independent of each other. So we kind of need to know which one you're utilizing. We'll deal with the idea of cloud off-ramp for things like software as a service. Okay. The idea of direct internet access or internet access through a data center or a regional office is a great way of being able to do this. We'll see that we integrate DNS with Cisco Umbrella as one of our pieces that can be a part of this. Again, a tight integration within the SD-WAN solution. We're treating these cloud services as if they're nothing more than a branch office in our network. Okay, so how do we integrate that? How do we make sure that we can communicate and make sure that we're utilizing our best transport network to be able to reach those services and get a better quality of experience for that particular application? Okay. As they show, they also implement control and data policies across the SD-WAN fabric to integrate things like Umbrella, cloud security. They show the idea that we'll finally go through and practice troubleshooting cloud connectivity related issues that we have. And there is an exam, the 300-404-440 exam. And again, this class is up to 40 credits that we have available for us. The next class is we have the ENNA, is designing and implementing enterprise network assurance. As they show, it's trying to expand our knowledge and skills in the realm of network assurance and management, making sure that the devices are up and running, that they're running correctly. So they show it's a broad spectrum of network assurance and monitoring aspects that we're going to see within here. It utilizes certain products like Thousand Eyes, Meraki Insight. You'll get the skills to not just utilize these solutions, but to deploy and configure and manage these network environments as well. So they show, talks about the idea of initial setup, fine-tuning, get us optimal performance, and day-to-day operations. Okay. Again, there is an exam for this, the 300-445 exam. And this one's worth 32 continuing education credits as well. We have the ENSLD course. Okay, it's the designing Cisco enterprise networks, really more of the design aspects. Gives you the knowledge and skills needed to go through and design an enterprise network in today's deep dive environment. Okay, so we're going to see go through all the different topics. So really going through, again, a lot of the topics that are covered in the ENCOR but can't be run through. So a lot of these are a part of the self-study portions of the ENCOR. So great to go through and take this class before taking our ENCOR exam, if you have the availability to be able to do that. But there is an individual exam for it as well, okay? The 300-420 exam. And again, this will give us up to 40 continuing education credits. The next class we have is the ENWLSD course, the Designing Cisco Enterprise Wireless Networks course, introducing you to the contacts and planning, going through and deploying and designing what we have for Cisco wireless training. It also goes through and talks about things like location services that we have available for us. There is an exam for it, the 300-425 exam. And again, this class gives us up to 40 continuing education credits. Here's the ENAUI course, the Implementing Automation for Cisco Enterprise Solutions, okay? This teaching us, again, how to implement automation solutions, including things like orchestration, telemetry information, automational tools that we have available for us. They highlight the idea of the benefits of leveraging programmability and automation into an enterprise campus environment and the wide area network with third-party tools such as REST config, net config, Python scripting. We'll see that we go through and talk about a lot of data modules in this case as well. The data models will give you information about how we implement that and what kind of output we get for intent-based enterprise networking, okay? They showed also highly integrates into the SD-WAN environment and the Cisco Meraki dashboard as well, okay? Again, there's a test for it called the EN Auto exam, so 300-435, and this particular class gives us 24 continuing education credits. So one of the classes that I see a lot of people use to get their routing and switching enterprise CCNA is the NRC class. The NARSI class is implementing Cisco Enterprise Advanced Routing Services. This, again, goes through a little bit more deep dive, really discussing the idea of kind of what we talk about in the ENCOR as far as routing services, EIGRP, OSPF, BGP, but they go through a much more deep dive and advanced training in each one of those routing protocols, including things like route redistribution, policy-based routing that we have available for us, and more securing of it as a device level, like device hardening that we have, okay? I personally feel if I was going to take the CCNP to become a CCNP enterprise, if I'm really looking for routing and switching, the ENCOR and the NRC class, I think are both great classes to go through. I, again, would say this would be a great class to take the ENCOR and the NRC course before ever actually going through and trying to take your test for the ENCOR. You'll see the deep dive that we go through in each one of these routing protocols will give you more than enough information as far as what you need to be able to pass the ENCOR, okay? It is considered, the ENCOR is considered to be essentially a prerequisite for the NRC course, okay? Just give you kind of an idea of what they look for. And again, you'll see the test for it is the 300-410 exam. And this class gives us 40 continuing education credits. There's the implementing Cisco Enterprise Wireless Networks. Helps you implement and design network solutions to provide secure wireless infrastructure, be able to do troubleshooting. They show, prepare you to use the Identity Services Engine, Prime Infrastructure, DNA Center that's now called Catalyst Center, Cisco Spaces, connected mobile experience that we have available for us to monitor, troubleshoot network issues on a wireless network. Okay. As they show, they got a bunch of different great labs within here. They're all based off the Catalyst 9800 series wireless LAN controllers and iOS XE. Again, we'll have tie-ins to Catalyst Center, which used to be known as DNA Center. It's got its own exam, the 300-430 exam, and this gives us 40 continuing education credits. And then we go through and talk about the introduction to automation for Cisco network solutions. Again, no real test specifically for this particular class that we have available, but this is, again, a great information to know before going through and taking any like the CNAuto or the ENAuto tests that we have available for us. Okay, so really going through and dealing with some of the configuration protocols and REST config and net config. It also covers data formats and types like XML, JavaScript object notation, YAML, Yang. You'll see we go through and deal with a lot of DevOps tools like Ansible and Git, and using GitHub and some of the different options that we have available for us to be able to say that a lot of people have already done a lot of work for us to be able to support automation. Okay, so we can reuse those scripts and utilize our own variables to go through and make changes to it to be able to quickly go through and either bring up our network or reconfigure our network or start a network from scratch, okay? Depending on what it is you're looking for. I see a lot of people going through and utilizing some of the options that we have available out on GitHub to be able to go through and immediately bring up a data center connection. Okay, so to bring up that leaf spine environment in the data center or an enterprise network that we might potentially have. Okay. And again, this gives us 16 continuing education credits, but no test specific to this individual class. Okay. Great class if what you're looking for is an introduction to some of that automational training that we use all over in the network at this point in time and getting more and more predominant. There's a software-defined access fundamentals course, or the SDA FND course. Again, this goes through and really kind of gives you that idea of understanding an SDA and environment, that software-defined access that we create using DNA Center or Catalyst Center at this point in time. Introduced to the architecture that we have available for us. Again, no direct related certification or test for it itself, but it gives us all the information that we need to have for our CCNP for enterprise certifications. Okay, so again, you'll see it in the ENCOR, you'll see it in the RC course where they've got self-study information that goes through some of these fundamentals. I think this course really teaches I think it has a much better introduction to the fundamentals of that design in an SD access. Then we have the Understanding Cisco Wireless Foundations course as well. Okay, this, again, doesn't actually have an exam for it, but it's great if you're planning on taking the Enterprise Wireless Network exam or the Implementing Cisco Wireless Network exam that we have available for us. So that gives us a great information, a little bit more deep dive kind of information about what's going on within the wireless network. This again gives us 30 continuing education credits, okay? So the other things that we have available for us are just, I think they're already a part of that poll that we had, but I wanna open this up to a couple questions because I know some people had some questions. One of the big things that I saw, people had questions about the idea of the ENCOR test and some questions about that. Can I open that up and maybe go through a little quality question and answers about some of the ENCOR? What's my personal opinion of the new Cisco announcement today of the DevNet moving to automation track? Kind of like the DevNet culture. All right, so I think the idea of most people look at DevNet as being still in development, okay? The idea that now it's more a part of the automation track, I think is an important distinction, okay? And the fact that it is no longer that real development phase, it's more in the idea of the use and automation phase of the network device programming. So Brad, I think it's a great question. And it's still very similar to the DevNet kind of culture as far as I'm concerned, right? And still quite a bit of information out there on DevNet about automation processes. I think what they're trying to do is to make that more mainstream and not necessarily in that development track, but necessarily more about this idea that, hey, this is here and it's here to stay. We need to learn it, or we end up losing our ability to be able to increment and really deploy and troubleshoot our today's networks at this point in time, in my opinion. So Walter goes through and says that SDA fundamentals and ENCOR gets the CCNP enterprise. They absolutely do, right? So if it's got a test, right, what we need is an ENCOR and one of our tests that is available for us, right? So as I went through and I took a look at these guys, hey, hang on one second, okay? So any of these that we went through, okay, if they have an exam to it down here on the bottom, okay, that exam is considered one of our specializations, okay? You need the ENCOR and one specialization exam to become a CCNP for enterprise. That's what we are looking for, okay? What's the format for the new ENCOR exam? I recall there were 100 questions that have passed, but I'm hearing the format's changed a little bit. Yeah, so I don't believe there are 100 questions anymore. I think it's a little bit less than that. I think it's about 82 questions, but don't quote me on that because I do change on that for to let you know. Right. As far as what I've seen on it, you've got a lot of multiple choice, multiple answers, and they've been adding in new like simulation questions, if you will. We actually have to log into a router or a switch and make a configuration change or find out what's wrong. So do some troubleshooting within there to find out what's wrong and what you would add to that. So yeah, very important to make sure that not only do we have the book knowledge, but we have the knowledge of what we did with inside these labs in each one of these classes as well, okay? Which study book do I recommend for the ENCOR exam? I got to tell you, Andre, I think the best book is the student material. Okay. So as you go through and take the ENCOR class, the test itself is all based off of that student material and the student guide that they have for the ENCOR. But there are some other third party. I think Boson is a great one. Boson is Boson. Boson.com has the CCNP simulator. They also have a exam test prep for some of these CC exam questions as well. Okay, and I think they're a really good evaluation of whether or not you're ready to be able to take the ENCOR exam. Okay, the one thing that I always want to make sure that I point out to everybody: remember that ENCOR test is not only the first test that you need to take and the required test that we need to take for the CCNP for enterprise, but they also utilize it as the CCIE written exam as well. Okay. So think about the idea that because it's being used for the CCIE written, which I'm hoping they're trying to change, right? I am a part of the CCSI advisory team from Cisco as well. So they got a bunch of Cisco certified systems instructors that are out there that they're asking questions for. What should we make changes to? What should we add? What should we remove from certain of these classes that we have available for us? And one of my big pushes is to try and say, hey, we should really not rely on the very first exam in the CCNP to be the CCIE written. Okay, we're trying to do too much with one individual exam, and it puts more and more pressure on the people that are just trying to learn this and become a CCNP. That now all of a sudden they need CCIE design aspects to be able to pass a test. Okay, so I'm really hopeful that they'll be able to go through and make changes to that. So, but again, I would say the biggest and best things for recommendation for coming up with a study material would be the student guide for that they have for that test. So you tried on different platforms installing Cisco CML simulation lab with zero success. Okay. Is there any platform where can find packet tracer labs for the ENCOR? A packet tracer, I don't know if they necessarily have packet tracer labs for it. Okay. But I'm kind of wondering there, Regis, why you have what you're having an issue with CML. Can you give me an idea of what issues you're having with trying to deploy CML? Which, by the way, for people that don't know, Cisco Modeling Labs, you're seeing the image is not loading. What are you using for a hypervisor? Is it ESXi? All right. Verify that your ESXi hypervisor is of the current version. Okay. That's where I see a lot of people having an issue that they're trying to use an old version of ESXi and Cisco Modeling Labs don't support it. But other than that, you try different platforms of VMs. Yep. So again, I don't think it's the virtual machine itself and the OVA that you have for Cisco Modeling Labs. I think it's the hypervisor that a lot of people have an issue with. Okay. So make sure that your hypervisor and the version of your hypervisor, like ESXi in your case, is up as the current version of ESXi to be able to deploy CML. Yep. I've had great success with VMware Workstation as well. Okay. Rather than just trying to use ESXi in VMware Server. So VMware Workstation works really well. I use it on my laptop all the time. Yeah, and I agree. And Regis, I'll tell you this. He said, I gave up because I spent more time trying to deploy it rather than studying. And I completely understand that. Once you get it running, it is very easy to go through and make changes to topology and whatever you want to configure. Okay. So being able to go through and set up a lab just like they have in the ENCOR or the NRC exam or the NRC class, pretty easy once you get that CML deployed. Okay. Now, I've used GNS3 as well. The one problem within GNS3 is you need to have real Cisco IOS within there. Okay. So that would be one issue that I had trying to deploy that became kind of difficult to deploy, making sure that I had access to be able to download all the iOS image files that we needed for the device types that we were using within there. So I had some people that well, we're looking with the idea of what should we study within ENCOR? Okay. Anyone have any questions on the idea of what sections we should really be studying in ENCOR? How much IPv6 routing is there? I saw very little IPv6 routing in that particular exam. However, I know that they've been adding in more and more with OSPF version 3. And again, in my opinion, it's one of those things that I've been talking to the CCSI advisory board about, as a matter of fact, is that the idea that we don't really even cover OSPF version 3 in the ENCOR. Okay. They briefly discuss it as an option. For the most part, in the class itself, they really only cover static routing in IPv6. Okay. In that particular exam or in that particular class. It's one of the reasons why I highly suggest before taking your ENCOR exam, take the NRC class. Okay. Because it goes through things like named EIGRP. It goes through OSPF version 3 and routing in IPv6 using a routing protocol rather than just static routing. Okay. But for the most part, for what I saw on the ENCOR about IPv6, it was a lot about the representation of an IPv6 address. Okay. Like the fact that you can leading zeros in any given field are not needed. When you have successive fields of 0, we can represent that as a double colon. Okay. I saw quite a few questions on the idea of like the use of ICMP in IPv6. Okay. With router advertisements and router solicitation messages. And one of the big things that's completely different in IPv4 versus IPv6, IPv4 learns MAC addresses using the address resolution protocol. In IPv6, we resolve an IP address to a MAC address using what we call neighbor discovery. So we'll have a neighbor solicitation and a neighbor advertisement. Okay. I would really know the idea about how that neighbor advertisement and neighbor solicitation messages work in IPv6. But I didn't see much v6 routing because it's really not covered in that course. Okay. How about SD-WAN and automation? Okay. I saw one question on automation within there. Okay. And the big question that they showed, they gave some output of different data models. And they went through and said, which one of these is an example of an output in the JSON data model? Okay. So it's really about the idea of how that is formatted would be the one thing. Now, as far as SD-WAN is concerned, I really didn't see much questions for SD-WAN other than the idea of what devices play what role. Okay. And the idea that we've got essentially four separate things. You have an orchestrational plane, a management plane, a control plane, and a data plane in SD-WAN. The organizational or orchestration plane, excuse me, Cisco uses what we call vBond for that. And vBond allows us to be able to have a place where we can not only authenticate all of our devices to make sure that those devices are a part of this particular organization, but it also assigns to edge routers the IP address of vManage and their vSmart controllers that they should register to be able to download their configuration file. Okay. That brings us to the second part, the management plane. The management plane in an SD-WAN environment for Cisco is vManage. That is our pane of glass that we use to configure the SD-WAN environment. Okay, so it's where you make your configuration changes. It's where you go through and do monitoring to make sure that things are working correctly, to verify what we're doing as far as application-aware routing. We have then the control plane. The vSmart controllers are the control plane. They're dealing with routing information. Okay. And I always explain the vSmart controllers is very similar. If any of you guys are familiar within BGP of a route reflector in BGP, our edge devices advertise routing information to the vSmart controllers. And the vSmart controllers advertise that to all other edge routers that are in the SD-WAN environment. Okay, so they're dealing with routing. How do we get from one location to another location? And how do we bring up these IPsec tunnels from site to site? Last but not least, we have the data plane. And the data plane is with those WAN edge devices. And you'll see that we have what we call V-edge devices, virtual edge devices, typically more of the Viptela VMs that we're looking for as a virtual edge device. Okay. Then you've also got the C edge devices. That's a physical piece of hardware that's usually running iOS XE that we put into an SD-WAN controller mode. Okay. And it's those end devices, those edge routers that are dealing with actually passing traffic from site to site to site at any given time. Okay. So we're really breaking up that idea of where do we manage the device? How do we send routing information back and forth and build our forwarding information base? And then think of the idea of the edge devices as really how do we forward frames or IP packets from one location to another location. They're what's doing things like encapsulation and de-encapsulation of those IPsec tunnels, those edge devices. Okay, they're enforcing the idea of our application-aware routing and what traffic tunnel we're going to use to send a specific application. Okay. They show the ENCOR, another question here is the ENCOR exam description has automation topics. Do we need to be fluent in Python and these tools or just aware of them? I would tell you I would be aware of them, okay? The idea that Python would be scripting. When you talk about Chef, Puppet, and Ansible, okay, I would be looking at the idea of which ones might potentially need, do we need an agent? Okay. Do we need an agent on the device or not? Okay. So like, for instance, when I'm utilizing Puppet or Chef, we need an agent installed on that device before I can configure it via those two applications, okay? Versus Ansible is agentless, okay? It communicates using HTTPS to be able to get to that device, right? The idea of the application programming interfaces, again, they don't go into real great detail in the ENCOR exam for that, right? But you want to know the idea of what that application programming interface really is, okay? And I always think of it as an idea of a format of how do I interact with these protocols, okay, to the actual iOS software itself, okay? Let's see, they show SD access and Lisp. Again, I would know what that is for the ENCOR exam, okay? I wouldn't know a whole lot of big deep dive details into SD-WAN and Lisp. Understand what they're looking for, okay? The SD access environment is to be able to deploy an access network and keep users separate from other administrative devices, okay? Typically using a VXLAN environment, right? Lisp is to be able to go through and look up where is that individual user. One of the things you're going to see is a lot of other vendors do an SD access environment and a VXLAN environment a little bit different. Rather than using the locator ID separation protocol, we're doing a lot of things with the multi-protocol BGP and the address family of Ethernet VPN. Okay, although it can also be used, EVPN can be used in a data center environment within Cisco as well. So you show how much of the section below has been seen, configuring and verifying net config and rest config. Again, I didn't see any configuration or verification of rest config or net config on there. It was more about what the topics actually were, okay? And representation of the data models that we have, okay? So take a look at, there's, in the ENCOR, there's actually one good slide within there where they take a look at kind of the difference between JSON versus XML versus YAML, okay? And look at how they're represented, okay? I would say those are things that I would be looking at as far as not necessarily REST config or net config itself. How many simulates are the ENCOR exam and how much time is allocated to completing the section? Okay, so as far as the ENCOR exam itself, because I've made some changes to it recently. The last time I took it was like 82 questions. Now, how many simulates? You'll see, typically I see 2 simulates on the exam itself. I don't see many more than that. And I think you have an hour and a half to be able to take this test, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to verify that as of right now. What about wireless and network services like AAA and NetFlow? Yeah, I would certainly understand AAA services, okay? And being able to go through and create a AAA authentication method for sure, okay? Now, as far as authorization and accounting, I didn't see a whole lot of that, okay, on the exam itself, but I definitely recognize how to make a default authentication method list, right? So you're going to have to go through and add in a AAA server, whether that be a Radius server or a TACX server, then creating a server group, and then creating a AAA method list. One of the big things that I saw within there was the idea of creating a method list for 802.1x for authentication. Okay, so I definitely know how to do that. NetFlow, I don't know if I had a question on NetFlow. I got to tell you. So again, I've taken this exam now maybe 4 times since they made the change in 2020. I don't think I saw a question, one question on NetFlow as of yet. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not to say that you won't see anything about NetFlow, but my guess would be it's probably more about the idea of some of the configuration. One of the things you might need, okay, and the fact that we need to create an exporter, we have to create a monitor. We have to then go through and assign the monitor and the reporter, or excuse me, the exporter and the reporter to the monitor, and the monitor gets assigned to the interface. Okay, I would know more of that, kind of that, what we need to configure, not necessarily how we need to configure NetFlow and the different steps that are needed within there. And again, when I take a look at this ENCOR exam, okay, one of the things that I always dislike about it is they throw out the idea of virtualization. Okay. Remember that virtualization really kind of a loaded term. Okay. There's virtualization literally everywhere in today's networks. One of the big things that they really looked into in this section is the idea of virtual machines. Okay. But then they also discuss in uh, it's the self-study material, the idea of SD access and SD-WAN. Okay. I would know a pretty good overview of an SD access and an SD-WAN environment. Okay. What I think of the idea, what devices help me set up that SD-WAN and SD access environment? Okay. Yeah. So I'm just looking at it on Cisco's website, trying to get an answer there for Bruce. You're asking about the number of questions that we have and the completion time. Okay. They still have out on their website, it's between 100 and 120 questions. Okay. Again, one of the things that they deal with is the idea that this is kind of an adaptive test, if you will. Okay. So if you get something wrong, they try and help you out, ask you more questions about that to see if it was just the one single question, or do you really understand what's going on between that particular topic itself. And you have up to 120 minutes to finish the exam. So I've been seeing just on a couple different forums within here as well, looking as far as the ENCOR exam. I've never seen this, but again, take it with a grain of salt. A couple people that are saying that there were up to 6 simulates and only 55 questions. Okay. Would you give you about 10 minutes per lab simulate, if you will, and 1 minute per question with an extra 10 minutes to spare? I know one of the big things they're trying to do is to get a little bit more away from the just question and answer type of an aspect with inside some of these tests. They're trying to make it more difficult to have like test dumps. Okay. If you don't know how to configure something, you don't know how to configure something. That's just plain and simple. Kind of tough to give you a test dump on what that actually is. Right. So I think a lot of that has to do with what they're looking for, and really trying to also make this as less of a memorization test and more of a practical knowledge exam, if you will. Okay. I think that's a really good thing to recognize as well. Go through and give you the last little information for me. Okay. Just wanted to say, hey, thank you guys for showing up to this. I hope you guys come back to some more of our Tech Talk teaches that we deal with here at Sunset Learning. And if you guys have any other questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to do so. You can send me an email. It's rhughes@sunsetlearning.com. And Carol, would you like to wrap everything up for us?
Yes, thank you, Russ, for joining us and teaching and helping with all the doubts. You all, if you want to know we have our Cisco Spring Splash this month. I will send the link here again. I already shared during our session. We do have some promotions, some discounted Cisco trainings, so we are more than happy to get to know more about it and explain if you guys need. Okay, thank you for joining us today, and I hope to see you all in our next Tech Talk.
Yes, thank you guys again, and have a great day.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.